Hello, my name is Mike Kuros, and I'm a member of Saskatoon Downtown, a Canadian Progress Club charter, and have been since 1991. This is the keys to creating a totally awesome club. I've done this presentation twice at national conventions in 2017 and 2018, and I hope to do it again in 2020 in Halifax when I get to see all my friends and fellow Progressians. This is a presentation for, it doesn't matter if you're a new club starting out or a club that's been around for a while, this is a presentation for all clubs and talk specifically about the things that I've seen have helped clubs succeed through good times and bad times and over the long term. So let's get started. First of all, a little bit about myself, a little bit about my club, CPC Saskatoon Downtown, and then we get into the meat, the important elements of successful clubs, the lifeblood of any club, and of course, the rules for successful clubs. A little bit about myself. I have been a member of CPC Saskatoon Downtown since 1991, a member for 28 years, which is over half of my life. I've held some executive positions in our club locally and at the national level. I was awarded the CPC Hall of Fame Award in 2019, and I'm the owner of a few businesses. I've also been a board member in some very prestigious organizations, including Saskatoon City Hospital Foundation, the Saskatoon Regional Health Authority, and Saskatoon Folk Fest, which is a multicultural festival that's been around for almost 50 years and is held every summer in our fair city. I'm also a professional broadcaster, announcer, and MC, which basically motivated me to do this video for my club members across Canada. Our club, CPC Saskatoon Downtown, was chartered in 1981. It is a male club. Our club membership is typically 40 to 45 members. We have 3 main fundraisers per annum, and we net between about $125,000 and $150,000 every year. One of the things that we do have that a lot of clubs don't have is typically a waiting list for members. We do have people that are trying to get into the club that haven't been allowed in yet, but we'll get into basically what our process is in allowing new members to come into our club and what that process is to make sure that they stay there. And typically we're one of the best attendees at the CPC National Convention, and we're very proud of that fact. Before we get on, I'm going to be mentioning things about clubs that I want the people to understand. These are things that I've observed over the past 28 years. It's nothing personal, it's just business. I'm not pointing out what clubs have done wrong or specific clubs, but I've seen a lot of things that have gone right and wrong in clubs, and I want to include them in this presentation just so you see the warning signs of what can happen, or if you think that your club is heading down the wrong path, what you can do to stop it from going there. At the end of the presentation, I'll also have my contact information where you can contact me by email, or Renata Thompson at the national office will also have my phone number as well, where she can share it with you if you want to talk about this presentation, if you have any questions or comments or concerns. But once again, this is nothing personal. This is just business. Let's get started. The most important thing that determines a club's success is the culture of the club. It's not the Canadian Progress Club. It's not the money you raise or the works that you do. It's the culture and how everything basically is defined by the culture in your club. But what do we mean by culture? Culture is a set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterize an institution or organization. The key component here is it's a set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices. Everybody has values that are individual, but the values that make a club successful are those successful shared attitudes, values, and goals and practices that will really, really define who you are and what you're meant to do. Now, really, there's only 2 ways culture basically is created. You consciously create that culture, or basically it forms by itself and typically takes the worst elements of a club culture that basically manifests itself within that club culture. If you don't consciously create it, it'll be created for you. And typically it'll be the worst possible culture you can imagine. So very, very many steps are taken by very, very highly skilled people to create culture in your club and to basically express what values and goals are important to you in your club, and to make sure that those values and goals and practices and attitudes are shared throughout the entire club. This is not something that can happen by happenstance. It needs to be consciously created instead of letting itself to happen by itself. There are terrible cultures out there, and there are terrible leaders, and you may have experienced both. Some cultures and leaders can be defeatist, arrogant, negative, whiny. Your club can lack meaning. There can be a general lack of motivation. It can be tired, angry. It can be bullying and even sick. Those are not great attributes to have in the culture of your club, but some cultures over time, if the culture is not clearly defined, may lead to these attributes, particularly if you're not recruiting enough members that are bringing in good values and sharing the good processes that you've already established. So in order to create culture, you have to teach it, you have to define it, you have to live it, measure it, and then reward it. This is very, very important. So I'm going to give you the step-by-step processes that we've done in Saskatoon downtown that have really, really assisted our club into becoming one of the most successful progress clubs in Canada. Culture is an interesting thing when it's defined by the CPC. Now, this is one national president didn't like this slide at all, but this is how I'll explain this. Typically, what happens in most service clubs is people get together for the service club, fundraising is followed, and then you have fellowship. I believe that this is backwards. I believe that what we need to do is basically have the fellowship first, followed by the fundraising, with the club being the tie that binds. The things, then you have a consistent goal, and in our case, basically, in our wonderful club, we've got Special Olympics at the national level that ties everybody together. But I believe that you need to have fellowship first. You need to be able to share that culture and get along for the most part, raise funds or do charitable gifts for the community, and then the CPC is the last thing you have. Because when somebody is joining the CPC, they don't know anything about what the CPC stands for unless they're taken out and actually gone to a national convention. But they can understand fellowship. They can understand a group of well-meaning individuals that are trying to do the best they possibly can. That's something that they want to be a part of. And it becomes their family. CPC in our club has become a secondary family for most of the members. So it's really, really important that you have the fellowship, fundraising, and then the CPC as the tie that binds, not the other way around. So how do you get into the club? Well, our culture is very, very important to us. We have shared goals, values, and attitudes and practices that we all share within the club, but it's somewhat hard to get into our club. Here's the process. If someone is interested in our club, their name is put forward in an email. Once all the members receive that email, they have the ability to block that member or potential member from entering our club. If they've had some bad dealings with them, if they don't think they'd fit the culture, we do have the ability to block anybody who has their name put forward in an email. So if there is no person that blocks them, and by the way, you can only block for good reasons. You cannot block for a reason because they're the same industry you're in, or you just don't like them, or you've heard bad things about them. It's got to be a legitimate reason that you have to bring forward to the membership chair, who is always our past president. And for that, if you have a good reason, that person will be blocked and not allowed to come to any of our meetings. If that person passes that first initial email test, then they're asked to come to 2 meetings in a row. And if they get along with the culture of the club, if they get along with the members of the club, then they're asked to join. But the process is if one member, and only one out of the 40 members that we do have, feels that that person will not be a good fit, he is not allowed to join our club. That's how tightly we control our culture. If a member makes it actually through the club, through the process, or a prospective member rather, the person who brought him in is responsible or vouches for that individual for the next 2 years. So that person is responsible for teaching that person what our culture is, how we do things, what they need to do, and what values they need to bring to the club. That person who brought them in is responsible for that member for the next 2 years. We typically always have a member that's basically brought in by somebody else. It's not people that just want to join us. Typically, if they've never heard of us or nobody knows them, it's going to be hard for them to get into the club. So somebody has to vouch for them, and the member that brings them in basically vouches for them for the next 2 years. This is what new members must do. They have to attend a CPC National Convention the first 2 years of membership. We believe CPC is a very, very honorable organization, and we expect that members get to go to the National Convention with our members because, number one, it teaches them fellowship amongst their own members. Number two, it teaches them about members from other clubs. And number three, it teaches them basically what CPC National is all about, including Special Olympics. It is very, very important that those new members experience things like the CPCF luncheon on Fridays that we always do, or the banner or the flag ceremony that we do at the President's Ball, or the Special Olympics events that we always have at every single national convention. It's very important that national people going to national for the very, very first time experience that and understand what national progress is all about. We ask them to sit on a special events committee or to chair a special events committee within the first 2 years. And also, they must endure some nonstop cajoling from the other members. You have to have a thick skin to be in our club. It's a very fun club. We have a lot of humor, but you've got to have you've got to have thick skin to be in it. So it is something. It's all done. If people don't like you, they don't say anything to you. If they like you, they say a lot to you. It's always done, and this is part of the member who brought you in to help the individuals understand that it's all in good nature and good fun. But they must endure some cajoling from the other members when they come in. Here's what the older members must do. They must step aside and let newer members have the opportunity to sit on internal committees. They must be mentors to new members. They must provide guidance and insight to newer members and sometimes watch them fail. And they must allow newer members opportunities to take leadership roles in the executive. Older members are mentors and not necessarily on the boards or in the special committees. Those are reserved for younger members. We want younger members to be involved in our club, and we want older members to sit back and share their experiences of being on those. What this does is a number of different things. Number one, you include newer members right off the bat so they feel that they're part of a team, that they're part of a club. I find that basically if you have members that refuse to hand over the reins of power, you will not get younger members. Younger members are the lifeblood of an organization, and you will have a club that is stagnant or starts to die. Older members must set themselves aside and let newer members prevail and run things. Sometimes you have to watch them fail. We've had a couple circumstances where younger members have taken over events and they haven't done as well. But the one that I'm familiar with is we had a new member that wanted to take over one of our major fundraisers. He had some different ideas. He was going to spend some money. The older members didn't care for it much, but they sat back and watched. And with his new ideas and his newfound energy and his new excitement, we were able to triple our revenue in that event because the older guys let him have the reins of the event. There's a big difference between controlling everything and saying, you know what, only the older members understand what can be done, and letting newer members come in and take over those reins. This is very, very important that new people have the opportunity to have leadership positions within the organization. So the brotherhood. Once you're in the club, you're a member of a brotherhood. We call it our fellowship. You typically refer to each other as in terrible nicknames, but the reality is you've got people that have your back. You've got very, very loyal individuals that are part of a shared experience that we call CPC Saskatoon Downtown. It's exceptionally important that people are loyal to one another. You always watch each other, not only in the club, but in public and in private. When somebody needs help, there's always 30 or 40 guys willing to share their experiences, willing to share their help, willing to back them up no matter what the circumstances is. So it's a very, very loyal club. And as a result, because it's loyal, it's trusted. It's a trusted organization that people feel very, very bound to. They feel very, very excited about having people that they know will watch their back no matter what the circumstances are. I will talk a little bit about the loyalty that comes in because it's about the men that are in the club, and I'll give you one little thing later on in the presentation that may sound a bit odd to you, but I think you'll understand what I'm talking about when I talk about how the men interact with one another. But once you're in the club, you're a member of a fellowship or a brotherhood, and you can do this in men's clubs, you can do this in mixed clubs, you can do this in women's clubs. It doesn't matter. But the reality is all you have to do, the value that's being addressed here is loyalty to your fellow member. So for the charities we support charities with the definition being children and young adults who, through no fault of their own, find themselves in difficult or life-threatening situations. Many of the club members grew up with nothing or very little. So many of them have experienced poverty or deep levels of not having things that they needed when they were growing up. So as a result, there's a huge empathy with these types of charities and a huge empathy with the guys that are supporting these charities. It's very, very important that we support the charities of kids that may have been in circumstances that we were in when we were kids. So our main benefactors are Big Brothers Big Sisters, an organization called Help One, which helps kids with sports equipment in high schools, etc., and a charity that Progress Club members founded called Care and Share, which is something that the kids have that they can draw upon, a dignity fund if they're missing things like snow boots or coats or gloves, that sort of thing during winter. We have them. We provide them with a turkey dinner every Christmas. It grew from one school with a dignity fund to 30 schools in the Saskatoon region that all have dignity funds and all have people with mentor companies assigned to those individual schools. So some of the member companies will provide money for resources, for audiovisual equipment, for all sorts of things that maybe they can't get through the school system. And they'll actually do things like having reading periods, etc. So where it's a way that we engage corporate interests basically with school children that basically are there to help. So this is a very, very good charity that three of our members started back about 20 years ago, and it's called Care and Share, and it's in Saskatoon only. We do occasionally give money to other causes, outside causes. We gave some money to the urology department at St. Paul's Hospital, and that was because a few of our members had been affected with issues with urology, so we wanted to give back to the community. And also, we give our president the ability to sign a $1,000 check to whatever he believes would be in the best interest of Progress for a charity. So that president can sign, assuming we have the money, can sign a check over for $1,000 if somebody's house burns down and people need somewhere to stay or they need some clothes, etc. We'll be able to write them a check for $1,000. So the president has the option or the ability to write up to $1,000. Anything above $1,000 must be approved by the membership. But the reality is the president does have a little bit of power to decide where the money's going, or some money's going. So once again, the culture that binds, all of us really came from a place where we had very little or nothing. And it allows us to have a heart with our charities, and empathy is the key with our charities. So those are the things that really allow us to understand what these kids are going through, because we went through it ourselves. What we're known for, our club, is we're known as philanthropists and successful businessmen, and we're also known as a Yahoos because we like to have fun. One of our values that we really, really find important is basically the ability to have fun amongst one another. We enjoy our clubs, and this is important because when you have fun, you've got lots of competition out there that can take away from you. I'll talk a little bit about the competition that we have as service club members, but the reality is there's a lot of other things that people can be doing and having fun and not going to a service club meeting. So that's why it's really, really important to basically have fun with doing what you're doing and making sure that you're actually making a difference. Because a lot of people can just stay home and watch Netflix and not have to deal with this kind of stuff, not have to commute, not have to go to a meeting. They don't have to. I can tell you that after 28 years, we have our meetings every second Wednesday night during the year. I still get excited about going to those meetings. I still love meeting night after 28 years because they are so much fun. Another little thing about our club is the fact that our value system is based on one premise. And this is a bit of a weird premise, but I think it works for us. Number one, everybody in our club to some degree is broken, just like every other human being out there. Everybody is broken to a certain degree. The one key thing about that is everybody knows that everybody is a bit broken. So what that does is it makes everybody humble, because nobody is better than anybody else, and we're only as good as the works that we do. So that makes them humble, and it also makes them non-judgmental, because you can't say that that person is better than the other person, because that other person may have problems, not like your problems, but may have other problems in different areas as well. So you've got a non-judgmental, but very humble culture that likes to go do good works. And that has been key to our success. It has been key to the brotherhood. It's been key to the loyalty, because we're being real. You have to be truthful. When you understand that you're broken, you have to be truthful about the things you do and what you say to one another. Sure, we get into the occasional fight in the meetings, but those fights go on in the meetings. They go on they get stopped, and then we go for a beer afterwards. It doesn't linger on. It doesn't carry on. This is very, very important because we are, at the very, very best, we're brothers. So therefore, families do fight, and this is a second family, but the reality is we all get along the best we can. So one of the ways we live the culture is we have an online private chat room and emails. So we're all connected through WhatsApp. So we talk constantly. In the 2 weeks in between meetings, we're constantly talking or telling jokes. We're communicating constantly because it is your shared brother. We have emails that we share with one another. We have non-progress event support. So if there's a birthday party going on, it's a little bit like Goodfellas. If you've ever seen the movie where everybody kind of stuck together and went to the party and the only people that were there were the people that were kind of in the mob. It's not as bad as that because we do other things, but it's that much fun. So we all stick together. We do non-progress type related stuff. We have regular lunches and planned get-togethers. So we do get together. We have regular lunches. One of the things that we do on the WhatsApp is if somebody has no meetings for lunch, they'll say, has anybody got plans for lunch? Then 3 or 4 guys will inevitably get together and they'll have a lunch. So it is part of that thing where you're never alone. You've always got the guys to draw upon, and you've always got friends you can go for lunch with. And also, finally, personal support. Personal support is very, very important. There's always about half a dozen guys that are going through tough times in the club. It's a matter of actually mentoring them, helping them through their tough times, giving them advice, sometimes holding their hands through this tough times, and eventually they become mentors to other people. The tough times that you may be having today, maybe those are lessons that you can learn to help somebody else later on. So there is a tremendous amount of support between club members because we are a second family. How do we know we're on the right track? Well, we believe that funds raised, lives are changed. When we raise funds and when we're able to do good works, we change lives. That's how we know we're on the right track. We believe we're on the right track because we have a high national convention attendance. We have a very low attrition rate. We don't have a lot of guys leaving the club because they want to be in it. When we do have people that are leaving, it's because they're getting older and they're spending more time in the States, that sort of thing. So they leave the club for those reasons, but they still like to be connected. We have honorary members as well as associate members that are still connected to the club. We have a lot of very long-term members in the club as well, people that have been in for 20 or 25 years, etc. And we have a lot of newer members, and it's a great mix of people. Because the newer members are taught the values and the culture of the club, they can understand and get along. So I'm 54. We've got members as young as 26 in the club, and we all get along like we're brothers. It's not a father-son thing. It's all brothers thing. So we have a lot of long-term members, and I think that basically our attrition rate, our attendance at the National Convention, the fact that we raise funds and we have a low attrition rate really, really shows that we've done very, very well in terms of keeping our club together. Now, we don't traditionally do awards well. We don't submit for very many awards. We probably should, but we don't know how to do it because we believe that the real reward comes from helping change lives. That's where the real rewards come in. And if we can help change somebody's life in our community by the money we raise or the things we do for them, that's the real award. We have been at Christmas luncheons with kids that have had to go in the hospital on Christmas Day to have major surgeries and provided them a Christmas beforehand for families that didn't have a lot. And the lives that were touched were not just the people that we were serving, but the guys themselves. They were more touched by being able to help families that needed a Christmas than they actually were. I believe that we got more out of it than families did, to be honest with you. And when you've got 40 grown men that have got tears in their eyes because they're helping a young family that didn't know where the Christmas spirit came from, but it came from us, that really makes a difference in the world. So we believe that we need to leave the city better than when we found it. And we believe that sharing the experience of our brotherhood is reward enough. It's amplified and it really solidifies our brotherhood. So sharing the experience of helping really, really does solidify our relationship within our own club. Here's the one thing I'll tell you about membership. It's an honor and a privilege to belong to the Canadian Progress Club. Understand that. You are all very honored. You should be honored and very privileged to belong in this great club, a club that was started in 1922 and has survived almost 100 years. We just don't take whoever wants to be in and their crazy ideas and maybe a culture set that'll clash with ours. It has to be hard to get into the club. We don't pick up members just because we need members. Now, I understand that I'm talking about a club that's got 40 members already, but the reality is one bad member or two bad members could drive that down to 15. So the reality is you have to be able to show everybody that it's an honor and privilege to belong to this club, and they're a part of something that's very special. It's just not, we need to put bodies in chairs. That's not the way it works. Look at it the other way around. Make sure that they understand that they're honored and privileged to be asked to join our club instead of just, hey, listen, we need to fill chairs. Make sure that the people you invite into your club will understand and embrace your culture, and that needs to be taught by the mentor or the person that needs to vouch for them. They need to understand the culture of the club. They can't bring in things that'll be detrimental to the culture of the club, because we want the club to survive and we want it to renew itself. So the fact is, it's not that we don't allow new members to speak their piece, but it's got to be agreed upon by all the members in the club, not just one or two. Remember this: define your culture first, then invite others. It's not the other way around. Don't let other people bring the culture into the club. Define your culture first, and then go out and find members that'll actually be attracted to that culture. And you better be interesting or meaningful, because you have a lot of competition. I spoke about this earlier. Remember that if you're commuting for a lunch or for a breakfast or for an evening meeting, there's a million other things you could be doing. You could be at home. You could be with your family. You could be watching sports. You could be watching Netflix or regular TV. You could be on the computer. You could be on Instagram. You could be on a number of different things. You need to make your club interesting and enough fun and meaningful enough that basically people will basically not do the other things and come to a club meeting. They know that this is important enough to be part of, so therefore it's got to be meaningful. Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about meaningful and meaningless lives. He says everybody can have a meaningless life because that takes no work. But when you decide to make your life meaningful, it means that's when the work starts. And if you want to make your club meaningful, that's where the work starts. It should be meaningful, and it should be fun, and it should create some passion in your members and help those that need it the best. Because if you don't, because you've got lots of competition out there. People can be doing a lot of other things. They don't need to be commuting to the club meeting. They don't need to be spending 2 hours listening to a boring meeting that has no fun to it, right? They can do that. They can be bored at home. They don't need to come to your meeting to do that. So make sure you're interesting and meaningful, because that's what's going to attract and keep members coming back. The lifeblood of any club is one word: membership. You need to continually find members. Even though we're full and we have a waiting list, we need to continually try to find members that'll fit, because there's a natural attrition rate that happens every single year. You lose 2 or 3 members unless you're a very small club and nobody's going, but eventually that'll change soon. But the reality is you're always going to have an attrition rate. You need to fill in the lifeblood, and preferably with newer and younger members than the older members. It's great to have a 70-year-old member that can teach you about mentorship, but the people that do the majority of the work are the people that are younger and energetic and are more creative. Always be seeking members. ABSM, always be seeking members. That is the lifeblood. A few years back, I'm aware of a club that was having some issues, and they put it as a mandate that they would do no recruiting until they finished working out their issues. Well, that club no longer exists because they didn't bring in lifeblood. And I understand that issues exist in clubs, but they need to be dealt with. They need to be solved, and your membership drive can never end. The same old members tend to create the same old club the newer members will not want to be part of. So the reality is every member that comes in will disturb the existing culture of the club. Every single one will disturb it. The reality is you need to embrace that and need to understand it and need to understand what they're getting at and what new they're bringing to the table. You will always have an attrition rate. You need to address it. New members will always create friction in a group, and that's a good thing. So when somebody new is coming in, let them create that friction. Understand where they're coming from. Look at their ideas. See if they're crazy or not crazy, or maybe even crazy enough. And basically work with those people. As long as they understand the culture, as long as the interest of progress is at the forefront, then ultimately let them be crazy with their ideas, because you might just change your club for the better. Your club should be a minimum of 15 members to a maximum of 40 to 45. Tom Peters states in one of his books that the best working group is a group of about 40 members. Anything more than that, you start getting redundant. Anything less than that, not enough jobs are being created. So you need to have at least 15 members, and that should be your drive. You get 15 members, and you have something wonderful to share with them. You've got the Canadian Progress Club, which is a tremendous organization. You've got them to share with them. Remember, it's an honor and a privilege to belong, and express that to people that are potentially looking at joining. And then what you want to do is you want to find different skill sets that can add to the robust nature of your club. And different skill sets, you want a lawyer, you want an accountant, you want a dentist, you want an insurance guy, you want a realtor, you want all those things. And it doesn't matter if you have 3 or 4 realtors, as long as they all understand what the idea of progress is, because that will be a good member. So the lifeblood of any club is membership. Never forget that. If you're not recruiting, you're dying. So this is my Bits and Bytes segment. Leave your ego at the door. The most important thing that I can tell any member is it's not about you, it's about the club. Understand that it's about the club and the people you serve. It's not about you. Feelings get hurt all the time. In our club, we do basically challenge guys when their egos get in check, but when their egos need to get in check. But the reality is it's about the people that we serve. It's not about you. Nobody's there for self-promotion or shouldn't be there for self-promotion. If they are, they're in the wrong club. Leave your ego at the door. It's not about you. Here's one thing that a lot of people have difficulty with. 20% will do 80% of the work of the heavy lifting, and that's the way it's always been. I know it's not fair. I know it's not right. But the best way to deal with that is to have somebody who's a great implementer and a mentor that basically assigns tasks to everyone. The best example I can think of is in 2017 when we held the national convention in Saskatoon. The current president, Glenn Wigg, basically was the chair of that convention, and he assigned a task to every single member of the club that needed to be done. It didn't matter how big it was or small it was, but everybody was assigned a task, and everybody had to do that task. And for the most part, every task was completed. But for the most part, you'll find that 20% will do 80% of the heavy lifting, or lifting rather. Here's the pro tip. Be one of the 20%. Be one of the 20% that does the heavy lifting, that does the work, that basically is in the background doing the work, is not necessarily chairing the event, but actually is doing the heavy lifting, because you're going to get the satisfaction out of that. It doesn't matter if somebody who doesn't want to get involved doesn't get involved. But the reality is you urge them to try to get involved the best of their ability. But 20% will always do 80% of the heavy lifting. It's nice to be recognized for what you've done, but you probably won't be. So once again, this is an ego thing. If you're not recognized, it doesn't matter, because how many lives did you touch in the works that you did today? Probably a lot. That is the most important thing. It's not about you. It's not about your ego being stroked. You're not going to get recognized probably for the work that you've done. I was fortunate enough to get recognized, but I was in the club for 28 years before I got the Hall of Fame award, which is very, very, it was wonderful to get it. But the reality is I wasn't expecting it. I was very appreciative of it, but I did 28 years of work before then with very little recognition, which was okay. The only reason, and this is a personal opinion, the only reason you publicize what you've done is to inspire others to follow or to outdo you. Self-promotion is okay, but I don't believe in doing it just for the sake of doing it. You want others to step up to the ground, or rather step up to the table and do whatever you've done in a way that they can outdo you. They can do better than you. They can help more lives than you. And that will mean that you've inspired people to do better for others. So self-promotion is okay, but only if you're doing it to inspire others to do better than you. Self-promotion for the sake of self-promotion is wrong. If you can find new members in other ways, do it, please. If you think you're doing it to basically enhance your club, then do it. But it shouldn't be to say, hey, look, this is how great we are. And this is one thing that's always bothered me. The final thing on this slide is I don't care if service club membership is down across Canada. It makes not a bit of difference to me, or it should be to you. The reason why service club membership is down is because they haven't made it meaningful enough for members to come. They haven't made it meaningful enough to make a payback for the commute that it takes to get there, or for people not to be with their families or their friends. You have to make your club interesting. You have to make it meaningful so that people will want to be there. If it's not, you're going to have problems. And it doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. It doesn't matter what the Lions or the Elks or the JCs or the JSETs. It doesn't matter what they're doing. It only matters what you do. And that's a terrible excuse not to have membership, is that other clubs are down across the country with clubs that aren't even in the Canadian Progress Club. So it doesn't matter what the other clubs are doing. The best way to teach new members about the CPC, which you want to do eventually, is to make sure they go to a national convention. Subsidize your members if you can. If you have extra money, pay for their fees, pay for their travel. Do something to get your new members to the CPC National Convention, because they're going to meet people like me and my brothers. They're going to meet other club members. They're going to love it. Whenever we bring new members to a convention for the very first time, they've experienced Progress for the very first time, and they never realized how great of an organization it is until they actually get to the national convention. Do this if you can, and even subsidize some of their costs just to get them. And if you get them there, they'll be lifelong attendees. I'll guarantee it. Women's clubs are very different than men's clubs. Fellowship can be displayed in many ways. I've realized that in many women's clubs, the meetings that I've attended are a lot more structured than the men's clubs. Here's the one thing that I would caution. It's a generalization, so please forgive me if your club's not like this. But what I tend to find is when there is conflict, men's clubs tend to hash it out. It may be loud, it may be obnoxious, but they tend to hash it out, fight over it, get it out in the open, deal with it, and then go for a beer. What I've seen with women's clubs is if there's an issue with a member, what they'll tend to do is they'll internalize it. They won't say anything. They'll let it fester to the point where eventually it blows, and all of a sudden your club starts getting damaged at a pretty significant rate because of this. I would encourage all members of all clubs that if you have a problem in your club, you deal with it and you don't let it fester. Deal with it as it comes up. It's because it's going to hurt just as much, if not more, dealing with it 3 months down the road than it will actually dealing with it right now. So please, if you have a problem in your club, bring it up, deal with it as quickly as you can. And finally, for this slide, meetings are as structured or as unstructured as your club culture allows. Be sure someone sober takes notes. We have a very unstructured club. We do have someone sober that does take notes. It works for us. It may not work for you. You may want to have more structure in your club. That's perfectly fine. But make sure it's entertaining, fun, and meaningful, even though it is more structured. That's okay. But you do it as your club allows. So structure is okay. Lack of structure is not as good, but you can still run a pretty good club with a lack of structure. Once again, if something is bothering you, say something. Hurt feelings get clubs in trouble. If somebody is hurting and they're not saying anything and they're not exposing themselves, or they're telling 2 or 3 people, then you've got factions that are working. You got to stop that stuff. So basically, deal with your crap, put it out in the open, and ultimately let the feelings get hurt immediately so that you can recover from it. That doesn't make any sense to hang on to stuff. Here's one thing that you may or may not agree with, but you're not going to like everybody in your club. Just get over it. You're just not going to like everybody in your club. There's going to be some jerks in your club, some people you just not get along with. But the reality is, it doesn't mean it has anything to do with your loyalty or your commitment to the Canadian Progress Club. Because you still want to help that person out, even if you don't like them, even if you don't get along with them, because you are part of a fellowship and part of a loyal organization in the club. We don't particularly like every person I don't particularly like every person that's in our club. Well, there's not a lot actually I don't like. But the reality is, I get along with some other betters than other, but the reality is they're still a brother and they still belong in the club. So that I'll do anything to support them. I'll be loyal, I'll be humble, and I'll be respectful of their issues or their challenges. Please understand, you're not going to like everybody in your club, but get over that. And one person can screw up your entire club. One person. If that person is not living by your defined set of culture, your defined set of values, that person can screw up your club. So teach them the culture, get them back to basics. If they don't understand, get rid of them. It's easier said than done. And the reality is, if they're going to screw up the club anyways, so you want to take care of that problem before it actually happens. One person can screw it up. It's a hard thing to do because it is a service organization, but I've seen clubs dissolve because of one member, and that's not a good thing. You must keep the integrity of Progress and the integrity of your culture solid and whole through the entire process. You can't have one person disrupt that. And this is something I've said before, but have fun doing everything you do. Fun is infectious. It'll make people come back to your club. It'll make people come back to your fundraisers. It'll make people come back to whatever you do. Have fun doing it. Make it meaningful and have fun. You can do this. But the thing, don't be so serious. Don't be so structured that it drives people away. Remember, people have options. They can online shop. They can go to Netflix or Crave or whatever it is. They don't have to be with you. So make it fun, make it infectious, and make people want to be there every week or every 2 weeks or every month or whenever your meetings are. And finally, do all things with love in your heart and your club will be successful. One of the biggest cultural attributes of our club is the fact that we love the people that we're serving. We love one another like brothers and family. And the reality is if you do it with love, it becomes even more meaningful. So treat each other with love and respect. Be loyal. Be kind, right? Get the messes sorted out if you have them, but ultimately be loyal to your brothers. And be humble and non-judgmental because those are things that'll help your club. So that's the final note. Thank you for sitting through this presentation. I hope this has helped your club. If you want to send me an email, you can send it to me at mcouros@ifsgroup.ca or mcouros@ifsgroup.ca. Or Renata has my phone number if you want me to talk to your group. Hopefully I'll be doing this presentation in Halifax in 2020. I'd love to hear from your feedback, your comments on this. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation as I have done putting it together, and I hope it makes a change in your club. Love to help you out. I can do as many of these in person as possible. I'd love to be invited to come to your club to speak on this issue. So with that, and thinking of progress, have a great night, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye.